back, everybody. This month, a brand new documentary reveals never-before-seen footage of a civil rights icon. The Lost Tapes, Malcolm X, documents Malcolm's changing philosophy during his final years and the moments that shaped his enormous legacy. Joining me now from the Smithsonian Channel, please welcome Charles Poe. It's good to meet you.
Thanks very much.
So I always wonder this when we have never-before-seen footage. Where did it come from?
Well, the whole point of the Lost Tape series is chasing down archive material that has not been seen before. And in this case, we have a wealth of sources. But one of the interesting stories is that the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X was part of the Nation of Islam. Turned out the dentist for the leader of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, happened to be an amateur filmmaker, and he filmed some of the early rallies.
Wow.
And so we had access to some of that material, which had never been seen before. And then we actually chased down, there was a radio reporter out of New York who on his day off had gone down to the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem on the day Malcolm was assassinated. And he immediately did eyewitness reports and interviews, and that material had been in a storage unit in Hawaii for several decades.
Had it ever been broadcast?
A little bit of it had been broadcast, but most of it had never been heard before. And in fact, they were so worried because of the atmosphere down there that when they did the transfers, everybody was wearing masks because they thought the mildew could cause some illness.
Amazing. So for people who are young, haven't read Malcolm's autobiography, which everybody should do, tell us a little bit about why he was so significant and what caused the rancor that led to his assassination.
Well, that's a long story.
It is a long story.
He is a controversial figure. We, of course, revere Martin Luther King Jr. from that time. Malcolm, in some ways, was often in opposition to him, whereas Martin Luther King Jr. believed in nonviolence as a tool. Malcolm X, most of the time, was speaking to the African Americans, and his message was to have them stand up for themselves and to love themselves in a culture that at the time was pretty down on African Americans. He was part of the Nation of Islam.
People are not having a great time of it right now,
well, no.
for that matter.
And one of the extraordinary things is we see Malcolm in the movie that Denzel Washington played him. What we found in looking at the Lost Tapes is this was an incredibly charismatic guy, a real intellectual whose views changed over time. And he's really significant in terms of the impact he had on the African American community. And to some degree, it's forgotten because it's overshadowed by Martin Luther King's legacy, and that's understandable, but he's an important figure. And
Malcolm went on a Hajj of his own, a pilgrimage that informed some new philosophies that he brought to light shortly before his death, which is all very interesting. We're going to show you a clip now, and I'd like you, if you would, to set it up.
Sure. Well, one of the things everybody knows, Malcolm was an incredible orator.
Yes.
And the other thing that he had a lot of skill with is a pointed, memorable analogy that would immediately resonate with his audience, and this is an example of that.
All right, let's see it.
Malcolm X, you were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader.
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
You feel that we're making progress in this?
No. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made, and they haven't even begun to pull the knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
Amazing stuff.
So he was tapping into a long American tradition of sort of poetic rage in a lot of his speeches, but that was an example where he wasn't speaking to the African American audience. He was actually trying to convey something to the broader audience about how it felt to be African American in the society at that time.
And his stories were so powerful in part because those were the things you could relate to. You can't walk in his shoes, but I hear you when you speak to me, in that kind of powerful language. What an amazing person. What do you hope people will get from this?
Well, I think history is not something you just shove in a box and put it into the back corner of your attic. I mean, it still speaks to us today. And what we're trying to do in this Lost Tape series is we take away a lot of the tools that most of the time we use in our storytelling, but we replace that by sort of transporting people back in time and having them live a story as it happened, just using archive from the time. And when it works, it's not easy to make these films, but when it works, you can kind of feel history as it played out and relate it back to your time now. And so much of what Malcolm was trying to say still does resonate today. It's not hard to imagine him at a Black Lives Matter rally, for example. And it's a tragedy that we lost him at 39 years old.
And Dr. King, I think about so much of what their voices might have done had they survived. And it's true, looking at history now, we may have lived through it, we may have thought about it before, but with each generation we learn more, we understand more, and we get more out of the words when we hear them again. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks
I'm
very
glad
much.
you guys are treasure hunting out there for all these amazing folks. The Lost Tapes, Malcolm X, debuts on the Smithsonian Channel on Monday, February 26th at 8 p.m. We'll have full details for you on our homepage, and we'll be right back.